Hello everyone. This is Darko 2012 from Global Government News, and I'm posting an article carried by Infowars.com titled "Underwear Bomber False Flag to be Exploited to Renew Draconian Patriot Act." If you need to read any of this, just pause. Otherwise, I'm going to go straight to the video.
But first, media reports in the U.S. claim that Washington may have known about an attempt to blow up an American airliner on Christmas Day. The 23-year-old Nigerian who'd passed through security at Lagos and Amsterdam had concealed explosives and was being watched by intelligence services in several countries. For more on this now, we turn to RT's Priya Shrita in our Washington, D.C. bureau. Hello, Priya. Tell us, what's the evidence that the government knew that an attack was being planned?
Well, Matt, there have been several reports that have raised eyebrows here in the United States, including one that CIA officials had prepared a report about the suspect after his father had gone to the American embassy in Nigeria and expressed his concerns about his son. And joining me to help talk about this is RT contributor and investigative journalist Wayne Madsen. Wayne, thanks so much for joining me. So first of all, we know that the suspect had also been in Yemen right before the attacks, and we had heard about the United States being involved in a civil war in Yemen, and now recently after these attacks, it seems like several politicians in Washington are saying that we should boost our efforts in Yemen. I mean, it seems kind of like a lucky coincidence, right?
Well, not only are they calling for increased U.S. military presence in Yemen, and the timing of this underwear bombing incident is very strange, but also there's calls for increased U.S. activity against al-Qaeda in West Africa. This individual, Mr. Mutallab, was from Nigeria. His father had gone to the American embassy in Abuja on November 19th and said, look, my son's being radicalized. I think he's a security threat. The embassy sent what's called a Visa Viper cable to the State Department and the National Counterterrorism Center that's run by the Director of National Intelligence. Nothing was done. He did not go from the Tide terrorist database, which contains 500,000 names, to the no-fly list. I think it's a little bit more than somebody just dropping the ball. This wasn't supposed to happen, of course, after 9/11 and the fixes to the U.S. intelligence community.
And so why did this happen? Why wasn't anything done?
Well, I think it's a classic false flag operation. This individual, Mutallab, his father is a very wealthy Nigerian businessman with strong connections to the president of Nigeria, to the top leadership in northern Nigeria, where the Islamic people live in that country. The chances that this individual was not known about are very, very slim. Now we have documentation of reports being sent from the U.S. Embassy in Abuja, Nigeria. We also know that the ticket was a two-way ticket. It was not one way as being pushed by some media operations in the United States. It was bought in Accra, Ghana with cash. It was changed at the KLM office in Lagos, Nigeria. Later, he was supposed to fly back from Detroit through Schiphol in Amsterdam through to Accra, but they changed the final destination to Lagos. I would also point out that the security company at Schiphol Airport is ICTS, which is a Israeli-owned firm. They were the same firm that allowed Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, to board the flight, the American Airlines flight to Miami. Same explosive material was found in his shoes as was found in Mr. Mutallab's underwear.
So, I mean, are you saying that the Americans just didn't take this, the American officials didn't take these threats seriously, or could it be something a little bit more sinister?
I think not only that they didn't take the threat seriously, they ignored the threats on purpose. Obviously, this, we had a lot of people sitting at home over the Christmas holidays, families gathered around a television set. Another terror attack, huge problems for travel now. We're being told people have to submit now to millimeter wave scanners, which will look under your clothing, provide an image of basically what's a naked body. This is what's being pushed. This is basically Patriot Act plus Patriot Act 3.0, if you will, after the Patriot Act 2 changes. Some elements of the Patriot Act were allowed to lapse. This, of course, will ensure that all those Patriot Act provisions will be continued by the U.S. government.
Well, as these attacks continue to be investigated, there are sure going to be many questions that have to be answered. But for now, it's going to be back to you guys in Moscow.
Thank you.
The Patriot Act. the most abominable, unconstitutional, hateful, from the point of freedom, piece of legislation since the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798. John Ashcroft told the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee the Patriot Act was so important that they didn't have time to read the statute before they could vote on it. Imagine that. Two members of the Senate claimed they read it, and one of them is now dead, Paul Wellstone. He voted against it. Russ Feingold says he read it. He voted against it. Ron Paul and his colleagues in the House were given 15 minutes on the House intranet, the internal internet for members of Congress and their staffs, to read the Patriot Act. It's 315 pages long, and it doesn't read like a novel. I have read it. I have read it twice. In order to read it, you have to have in front of you the entire United States Criminal Code, because most of the Patriot Act says, in 14 U.S.C. 1523, move the comma, change or to and, change 6 months to 8 months. It will take days to read this. Members of the House, without having had the opportunity to read it at all in any way, never mind meaningful in any way, nevertheless, with no debate on the floor, fearing what John Ashcroft told them, voted for the Patriot Act, and it passed, and the Senate voted for it, and with 2 dissents, it passed, and the President signed it. Now, the Patriot Act took FISA and said, you know those warrants that you obtained that you can't use information in criminal prosecutions? Now you not only may use that in criminal prosecutions, you must use it in criminal prosecutions. And you know that information that you got from the self-written search warrants, the financial institutions? You now not only may use that in criminal prosecutions, you must use it in criminal prosecutions. And you know the banker that would call up the client and say, there's a guy here with a self-written search warrant that wants your banking records. If the banker reveals that he has received a self-written search warrant, it's a felony for the banker, punishable by 5 years in jail. Now you may say, well, what about the First Amendment? The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. But the Patriot Act says if you tell anyone, your spouse, your lawyer, your priest, your best friend, a judge in a federal courtroom, that's right, every challenge of the Patriot Act has been an anonymous challenge, because if you reveal to a judge in a courtroom that you received one of these self-written search warrants, you'll be arrested when you walk outside the courtroom. Congress just forgot about.
And there's about another minute and a half left of that video of Judge Napolitano, but just for time reasons in making this video, I have to keep it somewhat short. But that's about it. So thank you, everybody.